This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Welcome back, ones, to another exciting episode of the Be One Change One podcast. And you know what, Cass, dude, we don't do this enough. I think we really suck at self-promotion. So I'm going to humbly ask the, 15 or so listeners that come to us every week to please like, subscribe, leave a review, share it with other people.
Yeah.
Help us get the messages out. You know, we got some other things working behind the scenes that we'd like to share with some other people and grow the audience a little bit. So guys, help us out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Cass and I suck at it. And
we do.
Identifying things that you suck at, we're asking for help.
Yes, we are.
We're practicing what we preach.
Yeah.
So Cass was just telling me about his check ride and critical action procedures, which are, why don't you explain what critical action procedures and memory items are?
Yeah, so in the Air Force, we call them critical action procedures. On the civilian side where I'm at, they call them memory items, but they're basically checklists that you have to be able to run from memory. They're time critical. They're usually in a critical phase of flight. And so they're things that you have to memorize, how the flow goes, and then what the steps are in sequence so that you can rapidly react to a bad situation that's going on in the airplane.
All right. So story time with Roscoe. In the Strike Eagle, we did not have caps.
No way.
There was no such thing in the light gray or the dark gray. There's no such thing. I mean, there's a couple of things that you needed to know, like, you know, if you have a JFS fire or if you have an engine fire, button bottle throttle or button throttle bottle. If you have a bleed air leak, air source opposite throttle idle, you know, those kinds of things. But it wasn't what we would call critical action procedures. I'd actually never even heard that term. So fast forward, I get down to Luke and I'm starting my very abbreviated F-16 training.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting through a SOC course with a couple of generals who've been, probably 3,000 hour guys. And then Roscoe, who's been in an F-16 one time.
Yeah.
And Shifty Miller, I show up for my first sim.
I remember.
And Shifty Miller is my instructor. And so he puts me in the cockpit and starts, we start going through the engine starting sequence, and I forget which EP it was. It might have been a takeoff. It might have been something to do with starting the engine or whatever. And I'm just like, ah. And so I get the checklist out and I start running the things, and the jet explodes or we crash, and I die or whatever. And Shifty just kind of looks at me and goes like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, well, I mean, I saw the EP, I recognized the light. I was going to the checklist, and he goes, no. You have to know these things. I was like, well, over time I'll know them, but I've never even seen this before. He goes, dude, why didn't you just run the fucking caps? I would have expected a guy coming over here for the sim to be prepared for this. And I looked him right in the eyes and said, what the fuck is a cap? And so he had to explain to me that in the Viper, hilarious. We had, what was it, 10 or 12 of them or so that we had to fill out every week. Yep. And I imagine it wasn't so procedures. It wasn't so bad for us in an ops unit, but I can imagine you probably have stories about the B course. Like if you fuck up the punctuation, then you could be grounded for the day.
Yeah, well, in fact, there were several times DO, like we'd make the IPs had to do a cap sheet every month, but the students had to do it at the start of every week before their first flight. And they would turn it into whoever the top 3 was at the duty desk that morning. And he would review them. And yeah, dude, you spell one word wrong. You have one punctuation wrong. And they're grounded for the day. And so there were several times that, students, and nothing gross typically, not like they didn't know. I mean, you could look them up and write them down, but, missed a punctuation, spelled something wrong, or got something a little bit out of sequence, and we'd sit them for the day.
Just give them some forgot a dash or
remedial academics on
forgot a period at the end of the sentence, or it was. But anyways, it was a new reality that I had to get used to. That was
well, and there's a little method behind that madness too, right? Because And the civilian side's not quite as structured. Like you don't have to know things verbatim. You just have to know the steps in the appropriate order. If you don't say exactly what's on there, it's okay as long as you're hitting everything correctly. But in the military, it was just they wanted that because you wanted guys to be able to just react quickly because most of them were critical takeoff emergencies, especially single engine. You lose a motor on takeoff, zoom storage jet eject, right? Like just you wanted to know exactly. It had to be just if I recognize this and this is the issue, my muscle memory, my brain automatically goes to this. So anyway.
Well, I had to do a Class C investigation for a guy. You probably remember this, but the dude ended up being our DO for a little while. He was in the back seat. They took some birds. I forget if it was on a go around or if it was on takeoff or what, but he was down to the 310th, and they took some birds, and they did not execute the caps, and ended up landing the jet. It was fine. And so that actually became one of the talking points of the investigation was like, why didn't you do this? And he goes, well, I mean, I know what the caps are, but I also analyzed the situation and took appropriate action. Right. Everything was fine. The jet was flying. Like nothing was wrong. So we didn't have loss of thrust. We didn't lose a motor or anything. We just bent it back around and landed. So good on him for actually being a thinking fighter pilot. But on the other hand, if something bad would have happened, he could have gotten his PP schwacked. So there's a balance there for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's a good segue for some of the things that we're going to talk about here on the episode today. Katie sends me things regularly that she finds out there on social media or on the interwebs. And she sent me this a few weeks ago, and it's just one of these, scroll by things on social media. And it's titled 20 Hard Pills to Swallow to Get Unstuck in Life. And some of them are ball wash. I'll give you that, man. Yeah. Some of it's, just the standard sort of platitudes that we talk about and the everyday language. But we went through and we cherry picked a few of them. And Cass, if it's okay, I'll jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
Because what we were just talking about was on those critical action procedures, you have to be perfect.
Yep.
It has to be perfect or you get sat down for the day. And one of the things on the list here, number 6, is perfectionism is a form of self-sabotage. So isn't that an interesting dichotomy that we came from a world that demanded perfection, but at the same time in our personal lives, we're going to talk about it being self-sabotage.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what you say, right? What do you always say, Roscoe, about perfectionism, right? What would you rather get? Would you rather be,
I'd rather aim for perfection, but accept excellence.
That's right. So, and that's really the mindset behind it too, right? Is, dudes, we're going to hold you to a very high standard. You can meet that standard. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect every time. And we learn that every day in the debriefs, right? Because I still have yet to fly a perfect sortie, and I've been flying for 36 years. So, there's always something that you could have done on a sortie a little bit better. Perfection is a fallacy though, right? And I think that's the point behind this. And it can be self-sabotage because if you're a perfectionist and all you strive for is perfection, then a lot of times that's going to get in your way, right? Because one, it can just be the stress associated with it. Like things can get really overwhelming when you're always aiming to be perfect in everything you do. But more than not, what happens is with people that have like that perfectionist mindset is they get internal and they get scared, right? So fear becomes a big thing because they're so worried about not being perfect and maybe being exposed for that they don't share information, right? Or they don't ask for help when they need it. And they don't utilize the resources that are available to them, whether that's team members around them or other things that may be available to them because they don't want people to think that they're not capable of doing it on their own, right?
Yeah.
And that's a bad place to be in, man. Like you want to be able to rely on, especially in a leadership position, right? You've got to rely on other people. You can't do everything on your own. You have to delegate. And you've got to trust, you've got to give vectors and you got to give guidance and you have to teach people up sometimes, but you still got to let people run, right? With things because you can't manage it all yourself. And so I think that's what they're getting at with this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree, and maybe I slightly disagree on some things, which is fine. But when just thinking about perfectionism in your own life, man, what I think it ultimately will lead to is focusing on the wrong details. And, I have a few examples of some projects that I'm working on right now that who it was George Patton, General Patton. And I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't remember the quote exactly, but he said, "A good plan executed violently today is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow."
Yeah.
And the point is, like, get it to an 80% solution and
Mhm.
go try it out, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. No plan that you come up with, regardless of what it is, it could be driving the kids to school, or it could be getting a new job, or it could be flying a fighter jet downrange. It doesn't matter. But there's going to be a variable introduced that you didn't plan for, or that you have to alter and call a smart audible or change your plan slightly.
Yep.
All right. So no plan is going to be perfect, and no execution is going to be perfect. And I think maybe that's probably what George Patton is getting towards. Like, hey man, let's get it to a good enough and then press. And then, of course we can have that conversation that we've already had about what is good enough. What does that actually mean? And those sorts of things. And, some of the projects that I'm working on right now, it's, how long are you going to work on this thing before you just finally go, you know what, this is the final product?
Yeah.
Because it's nebulous. It's subjective. And the things that I'm working on are very subjective. And yeah, I could work on it for years and probably still not reach perfection with it. Somebody's going to critique it, or I'm going to find something wrong with it, or whatever. So yeah, I think there's value in holding a high standard. And I think there's times that you need to aim for that perfection. The example that we led off with, having to execute the caps perfectly every time, and Shifty Miller chewing my ass for not knowing it. And that's valid, man. We always say, flying jets, we were hamstrung in a sense where we didn't have a reverse option. And when you stick your nose into a fight at 500 miles an hour, you got to know that shit.
Yeah.
And you got to know it like the back of your hand. And like you said, it's got to be muscle memory.
Yeah.
But you know what, guys? In your everyday life, you don't suffer from that level of pressure, and so you can afford to kind of take a breath and, try some shit out, explore the space a little bit.
Yeah, the stakes aren't that high. And I agree with you, man. I think, you've got to be adaptable and flexible, right? Because there's always going to be something that pops up. There's always going to be some unforeseen. You can't plan for all the contingencies, and something invariably is going to pop up that's going to try to derail whatever you're working on. And you just got to make adjustments, shift, and then press forward. And then when you were talking about 80%, I just remembered when we had Richard on, the author that had written all the sci-fi books that have been really successful. That's one of the things that he said. He goes, I basically get my books about 80%, man. And then I'm done at that point. Like it's time to start refining and getting to press. He goes, because if I try to get it to what I think is perfect, he goes, I'll never finish it.
That's it, man.
I think that's the trap that people can get into. It's like that dog chasing its own fucking tail, right? Because you just never quite can get there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I've got some. I'll send you something when we're done with this. Something that I just wrote this morning that it made me laugh out loud after I wrote it, because it was one of those where, things had gone very well up to a certain point, and then I just got a fucking shit sandwich for about a 4-month period, and man, it sucked. But looking back on it, it was really good. Anyways, it's a funny little anecdote. I'll send it over to you, and you'll probably laugh at it.
Roger.
So that kind of leads into another one that's down the list a little bit, but it says waiting for the right time often means missing opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's kind of almost just what you were saying, man, was, if you're sitting here waiting for the stars to align and the planets to align before you execute on something, man, wouldn't it be better to just have that 80% solution there, and when it feels good, go for it?
Yeah. I mean, and here's the bottom line is there's never going to be a right time in life to go after an opportunity.
Valid.
You can sit there and make all the excuses you want. Well, if once the kids are going to school, then I can try to seek that promotion because, we'll have a little more flexibility at home, and I won't be needed as home as much, or, or I'll go to school when X happens, dude, if you're playing that game with yourself, you're just denying yourself you're just denying yourself the chance of that opportunity. That's all you're doing. And to be honest with you, it's probably because there's some portion in the back of your mind that's really afraid of jumping into that, because there's a lot of unknowns with it, right? And there may be a lot of external variables with it, right? It may be, and it may be uncomfortable to sit down and have a conversation with your significant other, or to figure some things out, or some of those things can be really scary. And I think that a lot of times prevents people. They go, oh, well, it becomes an easy excuse. Well, I can't do that right now because of X or Y or Z, right?
Yeah,
but
that's a cop out, dude.
It is. When the bottom line is you're just missing an opportunity that's right in front of you. And who knows
Yeah,
if you
and
took that, what that would lead to, or how down the road seizing that opportunity might open the
mhm,
door to something that frees up space for you to not have to worry. Maybe
yeah.
more money comes in and now you can go to school, or maybe more time, you're able to be more flexible with your schedule. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can come from it, but you'll never know until you jump in.
Well, obviously you have to weigh pros and cons, and you have to look at, the photo grande a little bit. Um, but at the same time, man, it's hard to predict the second and third order effects of what you do or don't do.
It is.
And so often we make decisions with incomplete information, and you kind of have to hope for the best. And I know hope's not a tactic, but let's face it, man, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
And we both have a lot of stories from our life that we could share that are good examples of, hey man, just you got to fucking jump off the cliff. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Ryan
Yep.
talked about this when he was on. He's like, start today, just
Yeah.
fucking go for it, dude.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, man, is like you can't predict what's going to happen next in a lot of cases. And for example, if I hadn't started going to school when I started going to school, and that was a fucking spur of the moment, slam on the brakes and throw the truck to the right decision, like, I mean, it was like, holy shit, I'm going to go to school. If I hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't have got selected to go to OTS and gotten to fly fighter jets. So, and I had no idea that was even a possibility at the time. I was just making a spur of the moment decision, jumping off that cliff and saying, it's time. I got to go. I got to do it now. And
Yeah.
Katie and I worked it out, and, things fell into place after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, similar story for me, working in the House of Representatives in Washington State, and then starting my own business so I could go back to school full time so that I could get to OTS before I got too old to be eligible for a pilot slot. That was fucking scary, man, because I didn't know if I was going to make enough money to pay bills, to pay rent and insurance and food and everything, right? And so that was a scary leap, but it was a necessary one, because if I wouldn't have gone then, I probably wouldn't have been able to have the career I had, because I would have missed that window of opportunity. And so, and I think oftentimes too, we think of ourselves as less capable than we really are. Like, if you don't think that you have the time in your day to manage something maybe that you're looking at, then all it's going to take is refining some time management skills, and maybe being more diligent about how you're using your time so that you can still meet the other expectations that you have with relationships or family or whatever the case may be. And it's never too late to a certain extent too. I mean, dude, Tina Turner, Queen of Rock, she didn't even get started till she was like in her 40s, and she was cruising through her 50s, 60s, and 70s, man. So, I mean, it's just, you'll never know until you take that opportunity. And the other thing too is those opportunities, they can be few and far between, and you never know how taking an opportunity, what kind of door that's going to open up down the road.
Yeah.
And how much better things can get as you take advantage of those things. So,
well, I think the thing that stops a lot of people, I literally just had this conversation last night with someone. I think the thing that stops a lot of people from executing those, maybe it was a planned decision, maybe it was a spur of the moment thing like I had. I don't know. Like you had a time horizon out there that was a brick wall.
Yeah.
And so you knew, you were like, fuck, I got to start today. If I don't start today, then I just can't get there from here, So different but the same kind of thing. But I think the one of the reasons that more people don't execute on those things is because they know it's going to be difficult, and they know it's going to be uncomfortable, and they know it's going to be hard, and they know that it's going to require some changes, and they're not sure if they're going to like the next version or if other people are going to validate the next version. And the thing that I said to this other person is, well, first of all, you don't know if you don't try. So it's worth it to just go for it, And the other thing is, dude, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it was easy, everybody'd have 6-pack abs and everybody would squat 400, So it's one of those things like, dude, you have to, you kind of have to take this holistic look at everything in your life and go, what's the most important thing? What could this lead to? And this is going to lead into the next discussion point on the list here in a second. But sometimes you don't know the answer. So give it a shot. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you'll be better for going through the process. I guarantee it.
Yeah, for sure.
The next one on the list that I think ties into this really well is luck plays a bigger role in success than most people want to admit. Now, just take that previous discussion that we just had and let's kind of break down what luck really is. And I read once upon a time that luck is preparation and timing. So if you're not prepared and you're not in the right place at the right time with the right qualifications, holy shit, man, look at my entire fucking career. And it's just a series of dumb luck. But that dumb luck came on the back end of putting in a lot of hard work up front.
Yeah.
Going to school, getting told no a couple of times, continuing down the path, and then getting a fighter slot on the back end. They needed a qualified IWIZO to come down to the RSAF. Well, guess what? Roscoe's the lame duck 04 in the fucking squadron that doesn't want to do anything else. I'm not promotable and I don't want to be promoted. I'm going to retire. So here, go down there. Right place, right time, right quals, right?
Yep.
But all that shit started 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Had you not gone through and done everything that you had done to get to that point, that opportunity wouldn't have even existed.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Which one are we on?
The luck plays a bigger role in success than most people want to.
Well, yeah, and it is, right? I mean, there's a lot of successful people that will tell you, that luck played a role. Sometimes it's, for athletes, it's, having a specific mentor in their life that really helped them kind of mold their craft, when they were younger and kind of get the focus and that drive and desire squared away that allowed them to do the work and put the work in to be successful. Sometimes it's just timing too, right? Just like you were saying, being in the right place at the right time when an opportunity comes up that you're able to take advantage of. And that's the thing that starts to propel you forward. So yeah, luck definitely plays a part. And
how about
you can be unlucky too sometimes, which happens.
Well, yeah, you could. You could. How about a high school quarterback who, he's been playing ball since he was 6. He's gone to all the camps. He's done all the drills, and lo and behold, they show up, and it's a bright sunny day, and there's no wind, and they're playing a team that has a run heavy defense. So he's going to get to spin the ball a little bit today, and there just happens to be a scout.
Yep.
In the stands. See, that's a little bit of luck. But had he not put in the work, he wouldn't be prepared to go out there and have a great game and impress that scout and potentially get a scholarship. And that's kind of what we're talking about here is you got to do the work so that you're in position to take advantage of those opportunities when they do come up.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. But luck plays a big part for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And like sometimes too, man, like for me in my own career, some of my luck was just leadership that I had at different times. And especially when I was first coming up in the F-16, I had really good leadership, really good weapons officers that took the time and invested time in me to teach me stuff. And then, as I kind of grew up a little bit and through 4-ship flight lead and IP, I had really good leadership at the squadron level that took care of me, and had I had somebody else in that role, potentially things might not have played the same way for me. You know what I mean? So
yeah. No, that's valid,
stuff
man.
that I have and that's stuff that I had absolutely no control over. The only thing I did have control over was the work that I put in day to day, the reputation that I was building for myself, the execution, my level of execution on a daily basis being high to try to build a reputation that was solid.
Well, what's the moral of the story is you did the work.
Yeah.
And, we benefited from being on these high performing elite level teams where, first of all, the group is very small.
Yeah.
And we hold each other accountable because at the end of the day, man, when the flag goes up, you and I are wingmen and we're going to live or die together. We're in the proverbial foxhole side by side. You know what I mean? And so it's in everybody's best interest to share those lessons learned and to take the extra time with the student and teach them these things and to show them where to gather all this other information. So those guys, I'm not saying they were doing it necessarily for their benefit, but it definitely benefited them and the team to bring you up to that level for sure. Now, what about the people out there in the, dare I say, regular world who don't benefit from being on a high performing team like that, where people are held accountable and maybe you just float through your day to day? Well, you have to go out and seek these things.
Yeah.
You have to be a little proactive and You're not just going to be standing around the bar eating popcorn and the patch come in and be like, come on, Cass, we're going to go back here and learn radar theory.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have to take a little bit of effort to go find these things.
Well, and that's where seeking out mentors, for some path that you may be interested or something you may be interested in, getting some advice from people that have been there and done it can be beneficial to you. Having a high personal standard in your own work, whether it's, something maybe that you're doing personally or in your professional life, is like those things don't go unnoticed. I was talking with David the other day. He's holding himself to a very high standard where he's at. And dude, they see it. They see it on a day-to-day basis. And I won't say what the example was particularly, but he was doing one particular thing, and a senior NCO came up to him and he's like, "Why are you still here doing this?" And he goes, "Well, sir, because I gave myself this personal standard and I'm not leaving until I've met it." And the guy was like, "Oh, I don't see that from a lot of young soldiers." So, like people notice that. People will see those things and they recognize those things.
That's awesome. That was he 25 now?
Yeah. 26, 25? Just turned 26.
Yeah, young man, still a young man, and he's learned that lesson.
Yes, he has.
And I'm still trying to teach some of my younger boys that piece right there, what you just said, man, everything matters.
It does.
Everything matters. If you're standing in formation with a bunch of other people at work and your boots are shinier than the guys next to you, people notice that shit, man. Yeah. People notice when you cross the line first on a sprint. People notice when you show up 10 minutes early to work. People notice when you bend over to pick the trash up out of the hallway. And you compile a lot of those things, and they're just kept in the memory bank back here of the managers and the bosses. And then one day there's a position that opens up and they're like, "Hey, guess what, man? I've been watching Cass for a while and he seems to be a stand-up dude. Let's bring him in and talk to him and see what he says."
That's
now
exactly
the onus is on you to impress, and hopefully you've done that work. But guess what, man? That opportunity came up.
Yep.
Yeah.
There it is.
Big O knot.
Yep. Big old knot.
Big O knot. So now let's take that and let's segue into we just talked about an elite high performing team where everybody wants to see you win. And let's look at number 8 on the list. And it says, not everybody in your life wants you to succeed. And I know I've got some personal stories of getting some shade when I made some moves in my own personal life. And I read this thing, the other day that was, it says, hey, if you become a millionaire, you know who's not going to be laughing at you? Other millionaires. It's all the other people that are going to be talking shit about you behind your back. So that's kind of, that's what I'm taking out of this. What are your thoughts on number 8 there?
Yeah, well, I think it's a sad but true reality that not everybody around you wants to see you succeed. And it can go back to, I'm sure that there were guys in the squadron at different times who, you're competing with on a regular basis. And, when you start to do well, maybe their opportunities diminish and they don't want to see that, or
that's valid.
You may have, we talk about the circle of 5, you're one of 5, and, you may have friends in your friend group. And as you start to make gains and start to move out of, what's important to those people, they may not like that, man. They may not want to see you succeed in that because, and I don't even think most of the time, especially when that happens in personal relationships, it's because those people are, necessarily just mean-spirited or have disregard for you. I think it's more a reflection of like, they don't want to deal with where they are in their own life. And so to see somebody who was in that same position, who's now moving out of it, is like a poor reflection on them and maybe their work ethic or what they're putting into things. And it can make them upset, man. And they may try to sabotage it for some reason.
But I have something to say on that real quick though. That's a them problem, not a me problem.
That is a them problem. Yeah. But where it highlights itself more often than not, Roscoe, often, honestly, sometimes is in family structures, where maybe you've got, maybe, because I know this happened to me, you've got a son to a single mom, who may be debilitated to some extent and doesn't have a lot going on for her, and you're kind of the one thing that she's holding on to, and she's trying to hold you back because she doesn't want to lose that, or lose you. And so, I mean, I dealt with that where, you got a person in your life that you care about, you care for, but they're like trying to sabotage you in certain ways because they don't want to see you move out. They don't want to see you move up in a way because they're so afraid of what that loss
Yeah.
might mean to them. You know what I mean? And so,
Well,
and those are hard things to deal with.
yeah, you're right, man. And maybe that's a good time to reevaluate your little circle.
Yeah.
Because I know I've said this before and I'll say it again, man. You're making the decisions that you think is best for you, and you're doing, you're living your best life and you're doing your thing, man. And the analogy that I use is like, dude, I'm going over there. Now you guys can come with me. Please come with me. But if you choose not to, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
Yeah.
And, at some point, maybe there's divergence.
Yeah, so you just got to look for that there. And we've talked about this with the 105. Look for people that are going to support you and be supportive in whatever it is that you're excelling to achieve. And if there's people that are trying to pull you down in that, then it may be time to let those relationships go or put them on pause for a little bit, and find people in that circle that are going to help level you up, man, and keep you moving forward.
Yeah. Well, let's bounce to the top of the list and just go right into setting boundaries is hard.
Yeah.
Being taken advantage of is even harder.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what we're talking about, man, is, you might have to set a boundary between some of these things.
And setting boundaries is hard. Like if I go back to that situation that I was talking about with my mom, like when I started to set boundaries with her, man, that did not go over well. Because a lot of times with folks, especially if they're kind of passive aggressive in nature, anytime you set a boundary with them, they take it as rejection. And so they don't
I've seen this movie before.
Yeah, yep. Right. They don't see it as you setting a healthy boundary and going, hey, I want to be in a relationship with you and I want to move forward in a relationship with you. But in order for us to do that, there's got to be some rules to the road, right? There's got to be some boundaries that are set and maintained in order for us to have that relationship, because I'm not willing to sacrifice that part of me, or I'm not willing for you to continue to take advantage of me through guilt and shame, or that's what my mom was getting at, was guilt and shame, and once I started to see that for what it was, I started to set appropriate boundaries, but that was difficult at first because it creates tension, and it can create a little bit of conflict, and then you feel misunderstood because you're just trying to do something that promotes the relationship in a healthy way, but they take it the wrong way, and now it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You're damned if you don't set the boundary, then you're fucked because you just get taken advantage of continually, and if you set the boundary, you're an asshole. So it's like, what the fuck do I do? But that's where it goes back to what you were saying, right, man? At some point you just got to go, hey, what do I need to put in place to take care of me? What do I need to put in place in order for me to have the headspace and the structure to, one, have the hope of having a good relationship with this person in the future, and two, to be able to move forward and do what I need to do with my own life.
Well, go back to what I was saying about, go back to what I was saying earlier about having a conversation with this individual last night. And one of the things that I think is this person is really struggling with is the idea that, when changes happen, it may not be accepted by, the friend group, or it's going to end up changing, who he is and how he operates. And maybe he's a little apprehensive about what those follow-on effects are going to be.
Yeah.
But dude, I keep coming back to this. It seems like about every 10 episodes I come back to this, and I firmly stand by it, man, where when we start talking about the things that we're talking about on our show and really deep diving into some of these deals, man, it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to think about yourself and how this is going to affect you, right? And so the example that you were just talking about, where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, man, I really subscribe to the idea of sitting down, either talking it out with someone non-affiliated, get a different set of eyes on the problem, or journaling it out or something like that. And I always come back to, like, which one of these is going to be better for me in the long run? Right. So right now, in the short term, in the short rocks or the near rocks, it kind of sucks, man. There's a lot of friction there. It's uncomfortable. And I've dealt with this with family members. Like one of my triggers, or one of my things that I don't like, is I don't like negative energy. I don't like people that complain a lot and, just, throw shade on other people and talk shit and stuff like that. Difference between that and sport bitching and what you and I do and whatnot. This is a Debbie Downer type person, because I try to be a little bit more of a positive, glass half full, throw good vibes out into the universe, you get good vibes back kind of dude, right? And you have to throw some boundaries up. And when you do that, yeah, it's gonna kind of suck for a little bit, because like you said, man, they view that as rejection. Well, you don't fucking like me or whatever. No, dude, I like you just fine. I just don't like it when you do that.
Yeah.
And so, if we're on the phone or if we're hanging out together, don't do that and we'll be fine. As soon as you start to do that, man, my boundary is I'm out.
Yeah. Well, and a good delineator there is, dude, you can still care about somebody or love someone, but not love that behavior, right? And so when you talk to them, it's really important too, I think, to focus on the behavior. Go, hey, I love you and I want to be in a relationship with you, but I really don't like this behavior. This behavior is not okay. It's not okay to do this. If you're going to be in a relationship with me. But those are just their boundaries are hard things to do, because one, it takes a fair amount of self-inspection and introspection to kind of define and figure out what those things are for you. And then two, just being able to set and hold that boundary, right? Because some people are like children, man, where you throw down the gauntlet and they're going to test it. They're going to see, is that really where the goal line is or not? And if you keep shifting the goal line, you're going to find yourself in that same pattern over and over and over with them.
I'm going through this with my fucking dog right now, but sorry, I just had a little PTSD from sprinklers. Always bring levity back to the conversation. So let's take what you were just saying and go to number 11. Your feelings are valid, but they don't excuse bad behavior, right? Same discussion we were just having on number 1 about setting boundaries. Like, it's okay for us to sit here and talk this out, and you express your opinion that you were butthurt, or you feel rejected, or you feel like I'm unfairly biasing against you or whatever. That's all valid. But when I put this boundary up, that doesn't give you a blank check to be able to cross that line with me anymore. Just because you don't feel good about it does not mean that you can violate my boundaries that I've put up.
Yeah, well, and it's just, I think if we're well-rounded, generous people, it's okay to be upset with somebody. It's okay to be mad or frustrated, but it's not okay to just be a douchebag about it, right? Or to go after somebody, or to start on this line of vicious personal attacks just because you're mad at somebody for something they did. What's more appropriate would be to have a conversation with them, because there may be a misunderstanding.
It could be that simple.
Or to get more information, right? And
it could be that they have an extremely low self-esteem problem, and
it could be,
and maybe it's not your place to point that out, but maybe they need to do some of this self-inspection shit.
Sure. But right. Every behavior is information. That's one thing that Alicia will always say. Like, if people are doing something, it may be mean, it may be bad, it may be wrong. And you can judge kind of how you want to react to it. But at the end of the day, it's just information. They're just telling you who they are and what they're about. And when they give you information over and over and over and over and over again, you should start to be able to see the forest from the trees a little bit and go, okay, I
look
see
for the patterns.
Right. Yeah. So, but but on the flip side of that, for us and what we want to be as ones, and walking in and practicing our own personal values and stuff like that, like, just because you're mad or upset doesn't mean you can go out and slash somebody's tires, or, no Carrie Underwood stuff here, taking baseball bats to people's Ford pickup trucks or anything like that. Right. Like, it doesn't justify bad behavior on your part.
You know what, dude? Did you watch her singing at the inauguration the other day?
I didn't.
They waited for, I don't know, 69 seconds or something, and the sound system was busted.
I heard like the sound was wrong or something.
And, they couldn't get the music to work, and she didn't ad-lib it. She acapella'd that bitch.
Nice.
And it fucking, as soon as, like, she's standing there, Katie and I were watching it real time, and you could tell the sound system was messed up, and it's very uncomfortable. She's just standing there with the microphone, kind of looking around, going, "Oh, what the hell's going on?" And finally, she goes, "Hey, you guys know the words. We're going to sing this bitch." And it ended up being better than if it would have been with the music.
I
Man,
bet the
she freaking
acoustics
nailed
in
it.
the Capitol Rotunda are pretty good.
Dude, it was pretty awesome. She's got my vote for whatever it is.
Right on.
So rolling right into the next thing here, where we were talking about how uncomfortable some of these things are, and difficult conversations, maybe trying new things and going for opportunities and whatnot. And number 9 on here is the best lessons in life often come from the most painful experiences. And I know you've got some really good stories about this from your first marriage and from dealing with some other things. And it's those things that sting really bad, that if you're objective about it, on the backside of it, you can really learn a lot from those things.
Yeah, well, we say all the time, right, that failure is one of our greatest teachers, and it's true.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about building resiliency skills too, but the key to resiliency isn't just coming through the other side, but it's coming through the other side better, right? Having gone to task, having figured out
learning those lessons.
Having figured out what went wrong, what your part was it, and what you need to fix for the future. And yeah, dude, my first marriage ended in divorce, and that it was through that process that I really went down the whole self-inspection, defining personal values, kind of re-examining what I was about and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up in the world and what really mattered to me, right? And while it was an extremely painful experience at the time, like had I not gone through that, I would not be where I am today, and I wouldn't have the relationships that I have today. If I hadn't gone through that process and figured out what my role was in it, the things that I needed to fix about myself and focus on for myself, and some of the things that I needed to go to task on to improve myself personally so that I could be, a better mate or spouse to somebody down the road. And it taught me a lot about, the patterns that I had in my life up to that point that had kind of been pitfalls and traps, and the relationships that I looked for, and led me to realize that that's not what I need. I need to look in a different direction. There's other qualities that were a lot more relatable and important to me. And while it was super hard to go through at the time, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me, honestly, personally.
Well, let me ask you this, man. How old were you when that happened?
Oh God, how old was I? I was, 2000. I was 34.
Okay. The reason I asked you that is I think I knew that answer, or I was damn close. But the point is, we sit here and we talk to the young men and the young women and, the early 20s, mid 20 somethings. And like, I was just applauding David at 25 years old, 26 years old. He's figured some of this shit out, and I know Caleb is starting to figure some things out, and Nikki's starting to figure some things out. And I wanted everybody to hear that and know that it's okay to not have your shit together, or to be, I don't want to say have blinders on, but you get comfortable on a certain path, and then there's an epic event or there's a turning of a leaf or whatever it is in your mid 30s, man. I mean, so that's, 17 years of adulthood where what if you would have known then what you know now, or when you discover what you discovered in your mid 30s. And the point is, guys, is like, this happens at any time, at all times. And you can it's never too late to make a change.
Nope.
You don't have to be figuring this shit out when you're 20. You can be figuring this shit out when you're 60.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. There's always opportunity to be self-inspective and introspective and figure some of those things out, man. And then look for ways to kind of improve different aspects all the time. I mean, and it's like we talked about, it's a continual improvement process. It never ends.
Yeah.
You get better at it and you refine some things, but it's a continuous process.
It's like moving, man. Moving always sucks, but when you do it 18 times over a career,
you get better at it.
Yep. Yeah, you get better at it. So skip down to number 15, and it says, if you want a different life, you have to change your daily habits. And what in Roscoe speak, what I always say is, your life won't change until you change your life. And if you keep doing, what is it? The definition, words are hard. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different
result.
outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, a different result. So if you want different things in your life, then you have to do different things.
Yeah.
Maintaining exactly what you're doing that got you to the point you are right now. Like we're sitting here and we're products of every decision that we've ever made and every action that we've ever made. And it's nobody else's fault. It's yours, right? You made those decisions. You did that thing. So if you want something different out of life, do something different with your life.
Yeah.
Change some of your daily habits. Try something new. Join a different club. Go to a different place. Get a new job. Whatever it is, man. And you can start to create some of these opportunities and start to see that maybe there's different paths out there. I got friends that I went to high school with that still live in the same hometown that are farming his daddy's property, and gosh, man, you're missing out on so much that's out there. You know what, man? Maybe that's what he just
maybe that's
loves
what they
to do.
want to
Maybe
do.
he wakes up every morning and he loves drinking coffee and watching the sun come up over his cotton field. And I'm not going to take that away from him. I'm only saying that wasn't for me. I changed some shit and got the fuck out. And I've really enjoyed my life of exploration and seeing what's over the next horizon.
Yeah. And on a personal level or even on a more micro level too, right? I think what this is really getting after is, if you're not happy where you're at, well, have some self-inspection and look at what your daily habits are. How much time are you wasting on fucking TikTok a day? That could be spent studying for that exam that you've been meaning to take for a year and a half to get that next certification, right? Or, if you're a fat body and you need to go to the gym, then what are you doing? Like, how are you affecting your daily habits in nutrition and eating and exercising, right? Maybe it's time to take a look at that. Maybe it's time to set a plan. Maybe it's time to get specific and get a little and start to develop a little bit of self-discipline around some things.
Yep.
Like that's what it's getting at, right? You're not going to change where you're at until you start to change what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
You got to move your feet, bro.
Yep.
There's this thing that I saw the other day. I threw it up on our Be1 Change 1 social media page. There's 168 hours in a week, 56 for sleeping, 40 for working. That's 72 hours that are left over. If you can't find 3 to 5 hours to work on your health, then the problem isn't your schedule, it's your priorities.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you were just saying, man.
That's it.
72 fucking hours and you can't find a little bit of time to work on yourself.
Yeah.
I get it, man. Life is busy, dude. We've all been there, man. I had 3 little kids in the house at the same time, working a full-time job. Mom was working. Like Katie and I went through a period of maybe a little over a year where she was working nights and I was working days. And on her way to work, she would take the boy with her to the hospital, and he would sit at the nurse's station playing his games or whatever. And then when I got off work, I would go to the hospital, pick him up, high five Katie, go to the house, get him all ready for bed and everything. And we did that for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Like, I understand life is fucking hard sometimes, right? It's also no excuse. Like life is always going to be hard.
Yep.
Go back to what we were talking about in the very beginning about if you're waiting for the right time, you're going to miss out.
That's right. There's always going to be a grind. There's always going to be something. Right?
Always going to be something.
So, but it doesn't alleviate you from the responsibility of doing what you need to do.
Yeah. Gosh, man, I'm just telling that story about Katie and I. Wow. Like life is difficult.
I know it can be.
Life
right?
is hard, man. It is. And sometimes when we're sitting here where you and I are, we're kind of on the backside of it.
Well, we're in a comfortable stage
because we paid our dues,
life, right?
and
we're
we did that.
We're in a pretty comfortable stage.
Yeah, but you and I have kids who are kind of in the shit right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know I'm talking to Tyler once or twice a week, and he's telling me stories about, he's just like, Dad, I'm just so fucking busy, like getting the kids here and there and dealing with this and dealing with that and working his new job as a cop. And I was like, dude, I get it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, now I tell you what, take all that, what you were just talking about, and throw a 9-month deployment in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And see where that, so yeah, man, life is hard. It's a crucible. And, hopefully some of our listeners can step back, look at their life and go, you know what? I can do this.
Yeah, well, it is.
I can get to the next step. And then when you're on the back end of it, you look and you go, man, it really wasn't that bad.
Well, it is hard, but guys, that's why we're talking to you, right? Is because all of the stuff that we talk about are skills, and skills that you can develop and build and refine, and all these skills that you build, develop, and refine over time are going to help you manage that crucible of life to a much higher extent and with greater efficiency if you go to task on them.
Yeah. So number 10 down here, it says relationships take continuous effort. They don't just maintain themselves. And you know, in the pregame, we were kind of talking about this, and I would replace that word relationships with like everything. Everything takes work. Everything is hard. Maintaining your house is hard.
Yeah.
Maintaining your physical fitness is hard. Your mental fitness is hard. Your relationships, that's difficult. You know, a good reputation at work. All of these things are hard to do. That also doesn't give you an excuse to slack off or not try to improve in some of those areas.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're spot on, Roscoe, because guess what? Anything that matters doesn't take care of itself, right? It's going to take some kind of input, some kind of effort, some kind of continuous work on your part to keep that going. And that can be relationships with friends. That can be a significant other. I mean, part of the reason that my first marriage failed was because neither one of us devoted that time or that effort to figuring out ways to continue to grow together, you know?
Yeah.
And after deployment after deployment and TDY after TDY, and we had just gotten into a rut and a battle rhythm, and we were kind of more roommates than lovers at that point. And, you know, it's just, you've got to, and that's the thing too. I think when you're younger, you kind of have we have these false expectations in our mind around, because, you know, in movies, everything's perfect, right? Like you put on the slipper and she turns into Cinderella, and then you live happily.
On Instagram, everything's perfect.
At the end, it's just all happily ever after, right? But that's not how it works, right? And it does take effort. If you really love somebody, you really care about somebody, then you have to invest time in those relationships. And I think as men in general, that's hard to do. Like one of the things that I think we always appreciated in the fighter community was you can see a dude that you were at a squadron with, and you cannot see that guy for 10 years. And then, you know, I'll cross paths with guys on the road sometimes at a bar in town X. And it's like, holy shit, dude, what's going on? You know, and it's like you never missed a beat, right?
Yeah.
But for those relationships that really matter, I think it's hard for us as men sometimes to kind of invest ourselves into those things, or even just to do you know, send a text or make a phone call every couple of weeks and just be like, hey, bro, just checking in, seeing how you're doing, right? We're not wired that way. We're not taught that way. We're not wired that way. You know, women are in general a little more relational in that sense, just because of how they're brought up. But you got to commit that time and that effort to it.
Yeah, you're right, man. And you know, when you look back on some of those things, like you know, you use the example of your marriage, and I'll use the example of a friend of ours that we lost last year to suicide. And you look back on those things and you think, man, just a little bit of routine maintenance on these relationships could have changed that outcome.
Yeah, maybe.
Potentially. And you know, maybe in your case, maybe this was the better path. Maybe the maintenance, maybe things happen the way that they're supposed to, you know, but I can't help but think, you know, to have a little remorse for not maintaining some of those relationships, being a little more proactive on some of that maintenance, that maybe could have, you know, created a different outcome.
Well, and I'll use you and I as an example, because look at the fruit that comes out of doing that, right? Because you and I didn't talk for about 5 years after we both jettisoned the Air Force, you know, just kind of crossed paths a few times. Hey, man, how's it going? High five, went our separate ways, you know, and then when we started talking about this in this podcast, I mean, look at the relationship that it's built. It's been very meaningful for me, man. I value your friendship, you know, and you're one of my 5 now, and that's
same, but not just us, but look at the spider web.
Yeah, and Francis
too. of different people that we've had the opportunity to talk to and influence and learn from just by you and I rekindling a friendship. And then, hey, you're like, hey, Roscoe, I got this buddy. And I'm like, hey, dude, I got a buddy too. Check this out, and before you know it, we're meeting new people. We're sharing new experiences. And
it's been so much fun, man.
Yeah. A little bit of maintenance.
Yeah. It's been awesome.
Yeah. One more, last one. Regret is the result of inaction more often than wrong action. Move the fucking jet, dude. Like, you got to do something. You're the example that we were talking about earlier about sticking your nose into a fight at 500 miles an hour with no reverse option. You got to do something, and it's likely not going to be perfect, but whatever you're doing right now is a train wreck that's going to happen. Okay, so you got to move the jet, and you can use that same analogy in your own life. About to sneeze.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what I would say to that is, hindsight's always 20/20, and I think oftentimes in life we're like, man, I really wish I would have done that, or I really wish I would have seized that opportunity. I mean, how many older guys do you bump into that are like, have these regrets around things that they didn't do, things that they didn't try?
Yeah. We did an episode on that.
Yeah,
old people,
opportunities that they let pass them by, relationships that they didn't invest in that they wish they would have, because it would make such a huge difference in their lives now. Like, regret is typically tied to, you being too afraid to do something, whether that's, missing an opportunity or a relationship. I mean, dudes, if you're a younger man, go to a bar and talk to women, right? Like, I'd
say go to a library, but
or a library, whatever. Get drunk and have fun. I mean, you're young, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask that girl to go get a cup of coffee with you, or if you can buy her lunch sometime, or because if she says no, who cares, right? What did you lose? Nothing. You're in the same fucking place you were before. But if she says yes, who knows what that turns into?
Hey man, you ever seen a guy go out fishing with one fishing pole versus a guy in the next boat that's got like 10 fishing poles out there? Like, dude, ask every girl in the bar out on a date. You probably get lucky and get one.
Yeah, you probably will.
Yeah.
But the point is like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because regret will typically be attached to your, whether it's fear or indecision or whatever, something that you could have done that you skipped out on, versus, you charging out on something that doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to.
Yeah.
Because there's really not failure associated in that. If you charge out on something and it doesn't work out, well, now and you probably learn something in that process, whether that's in your professional life or even in your personal life. You ask a girl out, you go out, she turns out to be a complete, mean person or whatever. Well, or, maybe you're in a relationship for a couple months and then it falls apart. Well, there's things you're going to learn from that relationship that you're going to be able to apply to the next one that may make it better,
loss.
Or you
may recognize,
you may recognize something in that person that is a turnoff for you that you didn't know before. And now you know not to look to look for that and to avoid
you start
that.
Creating the perfect superhero, man. You go through enough of those iterations and you learn what you like and you learn what you don't like. And,
That's right.
And it was no different than, growing up in the squadron where, every flight commander or every commander in DO that you had, you're like, oh, I really like the way he did this and I hate the way he did that. And by the time it's your turn, now you have a bucket of do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
So every iteration is an opportunity to learn.
Yep. And this is an evolutionary process, and there's no evolution if there is an action involved with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just stagnant.
Yeah, and I was thinking back to that episode that we did. It was about this time last year. Guys can, listeners can go back and check it out. But we read a bunch of interviews of elderly people talking about things that they regretted in their life. And to a man, every one of them said, dude, eat the cake, ask the girl out,
right?
Buy the car, like do the thing, whatever it is, do it. Because, hey, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but either way, you learn something and you look back on it and go, yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Go on the hike, man. Go on the trip. Do whatever it is, man. So don't just sit around and watch your life pass by, man. Get out there and do some stuff.
Agreed.
Cool, dude. Dude, that's everything we had. There were 20 things on this list, by the way, and we kind of cherry picked about 10 of them, but I thought that was a pretty good discussion.
Yeah.
What else you got, man?
That's all I got, brother.
All right. Well, be the change.
Be the one.
Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's be and the number one, change and the number one.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.